All right, we just want to welcome you back to the Echo Church podcast. This week we have Pastor Paul with us. My dad. I'm super excited. If you can't tell, we look a lot alike. Super excited. This week we're talking about Go Time Church.
Yep.
What is a Go Time Church?
It's great. So we're actually traveling through the book of Acts, right? And the book of Acts is all about go time. Like Jesus said, go and make disciples. And we're going to land at the end of Acts chapter 2, where Luke kind of goes through and describes what the early church looked like. And I'd say, hey, that's the church that Jesus built, through the apostles and disciples of Jesus. And it's a church that's designed to go into the world, to preach the gospel, and to make disciples of every nation. That's what the church is really all about. And it's not a perfect church by any means. There's no perfect church. Like we're going to read later, like they get into fights over things like circumcision. You think you've heard of church fights before over weird stuff. They fight over circumcision. If you don't know what that is, ask your mom or dad. But Luke kind of lays out, he's describing what the early church looks like. I'm not sure it's like prescriptive, like every church has to look like this, but there are principles laid out. And he just talks about how they're devoted to just a few things. They're devoted to the apostles' teaching, which is now the New Testament that we have. They're devoted to things like fellowship, which just simply means like doing things together, participating together. That's what it's like, two fellows in a ship. Right? And he kind of goes through those things and then talks about the generosity that's happening there, and just how they're learning and growing together, loving each other. And it's just like a great culture and a place for disciples to be made. And that's kind of what the whole section's about. Yeah. A Go Time Church is a disciple-making church, a church that's making followers of Jesus.
Followers of Jesus,
Yep.
Yeah. That's really, really good. And I think there's lots of questions about like, hey, is my church this, or is there a perfect church out there?
Yeah.
And in conversation with our small groups this week, if they're sitting there and they're saying, hey, I don't know if my church is like this, or I'm seeing like, hey, is there something missing? Or I'm seeing something missing that I think is valuable. What would you recommend to that person? Yeah. Or maybe they're attending a different church and they're like, hey, I came and I listened to this message and it feels like my home church doesn't have that. Like, what should they do?
Well, Austin, that's a lot of questions.
I know.
So,
I know.
That's great.
I did that last one.
I'll reiterate, there is no perfect church. Our church isn't a perfect church. There isn't one. There may be a perfect church out there, but you shouldn't go to it because then it won't be perfect anymore. So just because it's filled with people. So, I want to answer that question, but I also want to just kind of be reflective for a minute because churches are imperfect, I think there's a lot of people in our culture and society that have like left the church or are contemplating leaving a church or they've got hurt, Now some hurt is very legitimate. They've suffered like abusive situations or false teaching, and it's like genuinely legitimate. Like, what do I do? Where do I go? And often people have followed so hard in those situations that the people that got hurt got really hurt. But then there's a lot of people who are like, I'm leaving my church because it's too loud, it's too quiet, they don't preach long enough, they preach too long. Mm-hmm. I mean, for a lot of really, what I'd say, like reasons that they would never leave anything else. For instance, I know a lot of people who go to the bar and get in bar fights, and none of them go, I got in a fight in the bar and I'm never going back. Those people are so mean. No, they're there sipping the next weekend, right? Like, and people get upset, like, oh, we had a fight in our church or that person wasn't nice and I'm leaving. Those aren't really legitimate. Like those, so I don't want to diminish like real-time hurt. I think that it's important to look for the things. So in your small group, I think it's important for you guys to track through this passage because again, it's kind of descriptive. It's not really prescriptive. It's not really telling us what we have to do, but you can kind of tell what kind of church is going to make disciples. That's the kind of church you want to be in. Mm-hmm. And So all the way from, is this church a generous church? Are they sincere? And what I mean by sincere, it talks about they had sincerity and gladness. Like, is there real joy? And are people genuinely sincere? Like, they're not hypocrites. Like, they're not like I'm this way outside of church, I'm this way inside of church. Like, can I be real? Can I ask questions? Matter of fact, I'd say if you go to a church and you can't ask questions, not always questioning people, but asking questions. If you can't do that, you're probably in an unsafe place. Yeah. Any place that thinks that that you can't ask this question. Now, if you're in a church that's less than perfect and you're like, hey, we went through all of these, and you're like, I go to Echo Church and it doesn't match any of these, like, what should you do? If it's not an abusive situation, I would just recognize, like, I'm a part of this. Instead of trying to run or leave or go look for another church, that doesn't have the same problems, I would just say, be the change, be the change. So, like, if people aren't devoted to the Bible, be devoted to the Bible. If people aren't getting together, sharing meals or in a small group, just invite people over to your house for a small group. If the church is lacking, like, fellowship, we're like, hey, we're in this together. You can be the person that's actually jumping into somebody else's life. You can literally live this out. You can be the change, because culture it's not really something you create. It's something you are. And so I think people, and I would say for everyone that's watching, that's a part of Echo Church, like, where you see shortcomings, and we all see them. I'd say it's not something to complain about or even point out, probably, because probably we're all aware of it. But it's like, how can I be the change in this area? Which means that we have to stop coming to church primarily for ourselves, and we have to start coming to church for other people. We need to dig into the Word. We need to be generous. And all the things that are talked about, sharing things in common, praying together, participating in life together. I'd say be the change. That's the big thing.
I think also asking for understanding. Like, sometimes we assume, well, the things that are being talked about in the book of Acts are not being lived out because we don't understand the descriptive, prescriptive. And so we read it descriptively and we say, well, my church doesn't look like that. But if we just ask some questions, a lot of times, to whoever it is in whatever area, department of your church, they say, well, this is the heartbeat of why we're doing what we're doing.
Because it can look very different from church to church. It looks different. I lived in a little town in White Cloud, Michigan. You lived there too. And we often did services throughout my time there with a black church in our community. We do Thanksgiving together. We did some prayer meetings together. I preached at their church. Their pastor came and preached for Thanksgiving at our church. I remember one time they were having a prayer meeting and they invited me down there and they're like, Pastor, we're going to anoint you with oil, right? In our church, we had like a little dabble, do you? You got a little thing, you put your finger in it, put it on your forehead. They had a jar of Crisco oil and they poured it all over my head. It was like, dripping down Aaron's beard, like as the Bible says. I was covered in Crisco oil. I had to go home, try to shower it off, And the thing is, like, our churches were very different. And yet that's like an awesome thing. We're both doing the same thing. We're praying for people. We're trusting God. We just go about it in a different way.
It just looks different.
It just looks different. So I think that's great advice. Like, if you're in a position where you're questioning everything instead of just asking questions to try to understand, you're not in a good spot. But if you're in a place where you're like, I got questions I want to understand, like, are we trying to do this? What does it look like? So good and healthy. Well,
that's awesome. That's all the time we have for this week. So just have your conversations in your small group. I hope you have great talks. You can go to the church website, Echo Church, and you can find all the questions right on the main page underneath the small groups. We hope you have a great small group.
We love you guys.
Love you guys.